here with the lovely Amber, who is my gorgeous yogi friend. And today we're going to talk about yoga and the impact that it has on well-being. I am no one's yoga guru. I have an interest, but whether I'm any good, although whether being good is relevant is another question, but whether I'm any good is very up for debate. So I thought I would talk to you as someone who's who knows a lot more about yoga than I do and has been practicing for a bit longer, and just kind of find out your thoughts on kind of yoga and well-being. So I don't know if you want to kind of tell people a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name's Amber, and I do an eclectic mix of things. Yoga, being a yoga teacher is one of them. I also act, and I also do a bit of modeling, and I have a platform called Hair Free, which supports men and women going through hair loss. It's like a inspirational community website for people to feel safe and chat about hair loss in a nice community atmosphere. So that's something I do on the side as well, which I love. It's a real passion of mine. And as much as the acting and the modeling are a huge passion of mine, yoga has kind of really gone up there in the ranks over the last kind of couple of years. And it's been really something that's made a really great and profound impact on my life. I, around 3 years ago, had my first ever panic attack, which I believe is due to trauma that was triggered around my alopecia time, that I pushed down. And as soon as my body felt relaxed when I got into a new wonderful relationship with my boyfriend, that my body felt relaxed for the first time in God knows how long, but my anxiety decided, oh great, this is the time to give Amber her first panic attack. So the happiest time of my life, when I met the most beautiful man, we have the best time, that's when the anxiety decided to near its ugly head. So through that, I was like, shit, what do I do? My mom's a counselor, so she was really great through the whole time, saying maybe not having stimulating food, so cutting out sugar, not having as much coffee, obviously no drugs, obviously no alcohol, nothing in any form that would be a stimulant. And that helped to a certain degree, but I was still finding myself really just overtly stimulated more than I should have been. And my mom's a yogi. She's an Ashtanga yogi, which we can maybe talk about different types later on. But so she's always found it really helpful to her. She's never really been a person to kind of bang on about it, but she's always kind of would mention it slyly growing up, that it's always kind of been a thing that she enjoyed. It's always was the thing that she did to kind of find time for herself. So yoga was definitely in my realm. And obviously we live in a world where we know yoga is good for us in inverted commas, but I never kind of felt the effects of it. For me, exercise throughout my whole life, I think it probably stemmed from the modeling, was exercise was only a thing for me to stay slim. Exercise was only a thing for me to look aesthetically better. It was never about being stronger, and it was never about mindfulness, or never about exercise being a form of meditation. That for me, exercise and well-being were two polarizing ideas. Exercise was just for looking good. So when this period of my life was kind of happening and the anxiety started coming about, I thought, why don't I give this yoga thing again a go and not be pissed off if I'm not sweating by the end of class, actually going in and just taking it for what it is. I did a few classes, and at some classes I'd leave and I'd be like, oh God, I wasted 14 quid on something and I don't feel the burn. I don't feel my abs engaged or whatever. But over time and gradually, when I started to learn about it a bit more and more, I found a couple of teachers that I really liked. And don't get me wrong, it was not an overnight thing of, wow, I feel different, I feel calmer. But I think it was really the kind of journey of learning how to breathe with my body was a massive. The feeling I'd get when I was in Shavasana, where I could kind of listen to my thoughts without judgment. And it was almost kind of like I'd go on the mat before practice and I'd have all these kind of anxious, reeling thoughts in my head. But when I get onto the mat, I wouldn't try and block out the emotions, but I'd try and listen to them, but just gradually listening to them and kind of taking them in and letting them ebb and flow. So by the end of the class, I kind of had figured out or sussed out in my head what thoughts were real, what thoughts weren't real, what was important and what was not. So yoga began to become this like resolve at the end of a yoga class. I'd have some kind of resolve, which I found really quite fascinating. So I started doing yoga more and more. And then I thought, why not? I was quiet in work, and I thought maybe I could do my yoga teacher training. And when I went off to do my yoga teacher training, I didn't really have the idea of, I'm 100% going to want to teach when I get back. It's going to be something I'm going to want to share. But once I got there and I really delved in deep into the theories of yoga, the philosophy, how I felt, the diet, the vegetarian diet for one, obviously being a Goa is wonderful as well. And during that time as well, it was the first time of me not wearing my wig for a long period of time as well, and going outside bald. So this whole experience I had in India a year and a half ago was really quite life-changing and really made me grow as a human. So I equated that lot to the yoga and what I was learning there. And when I was there, I realized, I really do love teaching. And it made me realize that in my life, with my acting, with my modeling, I love the make-believe part, but the one thing I love more than anything is the community part. When I go onto a film set or a modeling shoot, yes, you're playing make-believe, you're playing a part by expressing to other people, but you're also building a community. So I thought, this yoga teaching thing is quite similar to my other lines of work. And I just really loved the feeling of being a part of that community, me being able to give someone something that I feel could genuinely help them in their life, and me learning from them, vice versa. And then when I got back, I said, let's give this teaching thing a go. And I love it. It's so much fun. It's something that gives me great joy. And the yoga practice within myself is really, really developed. I do it pretty much every day in the morning. And it really just allows me to just fully ground into my body. It allows me to, again, like I said before, listen, because I don't listen most of the time. It allows me to listen. Again, that's still the same feeling of like resolve. And I do feel stronger, and I feel more mindful, and I feel a little bit more ease and a bit more calm. And I now love it. It's now become a really, really great big part of my life, which I couldn't really imagine not having it now. So the fact of being able to teach people something that had a huge impact on my life gives me great joy.
And do you think that kind of teaching, kind of getting to the point where you can teach and you can share, is a really, really important part of yoga? Do you think that kind of being able to share, whether it's kind of as a teacher or in a class, share that kind of practice with people is important to the well-being sort of aspect, rather than just kind of doing it at home on your own?
It kind of really truly just depends. However way you like to practice, if perhaps going into your local studio and being around other people and practicing with other people and learning off a teacher, that's fantastic. I think at the beginning it's kind of good to go to a teacher, maybe go to a few beginning classes if you haven't done any yoga before, because yoga, if you push yourself and you're not warmed up and you don't allow your body to feel safe, you might have injuries. So I'd say at the beginning it's quite nice and important to perhaps maybe go to a studio, find a teacher you like, have that kind of exploration, and remember. And it's so hard because I have my sister, for example, and she does yoga now, and she always says, I'm really bad at yoga, I can't do any of the things, I can't do any of the postures. And it's really hard to listen but to hear it sometimes. But yoga isn't about if you could do a good back bend. Like, it is not about that. It's allowing yourself, if you were just to chill out in Shavasana for 5 minutes and just do a bit of breathing down the back of the class, you will get out probably as much as the person who's doing all the crazy headstands and back bends. So it really just depends. And either once you kind of know the basics, you know the certain alignments perhaps, and you know that they're the correct ways to kind of, there's obviously a bit of leeway, of course, with certain postures, but just some of the basics, then you can practice at home. And yoga can be quite expensive also. And it's a privilege to be able to go and practice. So, learning how to develop your own practice is brilliant. There's a few great workshops that allow people to really hone their own at-home practices. But that's what's wonderful about yoga. It can be, you can take little bits you like, throw away bits you don't like. It can be really adaptable to really suit your body and your work schedule and your mind. Perhaps it's a case of, I did a course in yoga therapy, and it's it's kind of more comes into play when you're doing one-to-one sessions. So say Joe comes in, random Joe, don't know who Joe is. Joe comes in and he's really, really an anxious person. He's really highly, 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 highly stimulated. And he comes to me and he goes, Amber, I want to find ways to chill out. What I'm not going to do is tell Joe to lie down straight away in Shavasana and try and calm him down. I'm going to try and work out some of that excess energy he has, make him sweat a bit, make him do a bit of moving, and then bring him down slowly. So it's being able to note where you are along, you know, your energy. So what kind of yoga would perhaps suit you? You know, if you want to feel a little bit of heat and then be brought down, or perhaps it's the opposite way around. Perhaps you like to start slowly and then build up. It's all about kind of gauging. That's the teacher's role and the student's role, to kind of gauge what works for them. That just comes with trying out different styles, right? Or trying different teachers.
You know, obviously, like you're saying, you have, and one of the things that attracts me to yoga is it's about finding what works for you. But obviously there are loads and loads, and I think we've discussed this before, of different types of yoga. Are there any kind of different types that you recommend for different stages of well-being, or for dealing with different, whether it's trauma or different moods, or I mean, talk me through it. What are the different types?
So I don't know all the different types. The ones that I'm familiar with, that I practice with, I'll speak about those ones because I kind of have a bit more of a personal connection to them, I suppose. I teach and practice mostly Vinyasa yoga, which is it's sequence of movements with breath. So each yoga teacher has the freedom to create their own flow. So anytime you see Vinyasa, it means that it varies completely. Henceforth, why finding a teacher that suits you matters. Is really beneficial. So Vinyasa is kind of a little bit more free flowing. It's a little bit more flowy. You're never going to be doing the same thing. If you go to that teacher twice in a row, probably not going to get the same postures that you're doing, perhaps. You have Ashtanga yoga, which is a set sequence. So you will be going into practice and doing the exact same thing every single time, which can be great for some people. People sometimes, that's what my mom does for 20 years. She adores the stability of it. She adores the routine of it. And she can really gauge when she's practicing how her body is, because she's doing it every day. She can really sense of, oh, that feels a bit strange today. I wonder why. Or, oh, I feel really strong in that today. You know what? I wonder why. So there's that. So that's a little bit more formulaic, that definitely, and strong. It's a strong yoga practice. So you are, by the end of it, you are very, very tired. But also with beginners, it's quite nice because you learn a sequence and you follow it. Do you know what I mean? And it's a great way to learn that practice and then do it at home. The other yoga that I love to do, and I would like to be able to teach it someday, is yin yoga. And yin yoga is much more chilled. It's much slower. And you basically, I'd say in a class, you're doing 10 postures all together, but you're holding the posture for much, much longer, which allows all the fascia and all the tissues to relax really slowly, and allows the body to really just relax over time. Instead of more of a fast-paced vinyasa class, for example, it's much slower and the fascia is opening in a much calmer way. So that could be good, for example, for high energy types, perhaps, that are comfortable with being still. It could be fantastic. People, again, who have perhaps some injuries, who yoga sometimes can irritate injuries, that yin is great for that. And then you have restorative yoga, which is similar to yin, but it's a little even on the lower side of things as well. So even a little bit more calm. It's almost kind of like a step up from meditation. It's like a real deep meditation with slight bit of movement. And again, that's good for your anxious type A personalities to find that kind of stillness and calmness. So it really just depends. I would also say, if someone's kind of starting out in their yoga journey, to try as many classes and different styles as possible. And what's so great about London is each studio has intro offers, right? So you pay like 30 quid and you can try every single teacher, every single style, until you feel like, oh, this is quite nice. And it will develop and change over time. Like when I went to India and I was doing Ashtanga there, I fell in love with Ashtanga and I loved it. I loved the routine of it. But then when I came back to London, it didn't stick as much as I perhaps thought it would. I love it now every now and then, but sometimes I can find it a bit too hard on my body. Sometimes I like classes that are a little bit more flowy and not as physically demanding, shall we say. So they're the practices that I do. I don't teach the others. I just teach vinyasa mainly. But it's, again, for any kind of mental imbalances or trying to find it, we're using yoga to try and really help with mental health, which I truly believe that it does. Finding what works for you has to be a little bit of a journey. Any person could say, oh, I'm a yoga teacher, so I think this yoga will be great for you because you have a tendency to be anxious, or you have the tendency to be a little bit more depressed, you have low mood. I could say what I think perhaps might help, but truly, I don't know. Only you will know by trying and discovering that. But if someone has anxiety, for example, they have the feeling or the want to be grounded. So that would be finding a vinyasa class and a teacher who has a grounding energy, or lots of grounding poses. Someone who has a low mood, for example, them being able to be lifted by someone's really bright energy, and doing lots of back bends and heart opening postures. It's kind of, it's a journey, and it's a fun journey to really establish the teachers and the styles that would work for you.
What do you think about, so we've talked a little bit about different types of yoga, and obviously, as you're saying, and I do agree with you, it's important to kind of find what works for you in order to really get the benefit from it. What do you think, though, about some of the, I guess, I don't know how to describe them, slightly less traditional, slightly more creative types of yoga that have been coming out over the past few years? Do you think that those types of yoga also have benefit?
You have some yoga teachers would be like, that's all a fad, hip-hop yoga, you're ruining the art of yoga, and I'm sure there's lots of yogis, and I truly respect them for having those point of view, because everyone has a right to their own point of view, right? But first of all, hip-hop yoga, if that floats your boat, bloody do it, because that's your form of meditation, right? If you're interested in something like hip-hop yoga, there's a place up the road from you that actually do it in East London called Fly London. And they do a hip-hop yoga every Friday evening. So you go with your gals, you go on, there's Beyonce in the back, you're in your downward dog, you do a bit of twerking. Like, that's fab. I think it's a bit of fun, right? It's a bit of fun. You're finding what works for you.
Treating me like a beginner, because I am relatively, I mean, I do your classes. You don't see my form. It's not that great. And I have done classes in the past, but, I think there's a lot of work I would like to do when it comes to yoga, because I do find those benefits when I have done it. In terms of
what kind of yoga have you done? Which classes do you enjoy going to?
So I really enjoy vinyasa classes. I used to go to one in Soho, which was fantastic. I had a teacher that would make me laugh continuously throughout.
Love that.
And so that was part of the joy. It was hard work, but you were kind of laughing through it and community as a class.
What's important as well for me, I don't find comfort in teachers that make me feel nervous or make it really formulaic. And like, if you have a laugh, if you're not in the right form, it's that to be a safe place and not to feel like it's dogmatic and they're the guru, we're listening to them. It's literally yoga. Like I said, yoga means community. So wanting to have that safe, to have a play, yoga should be a bit of a play, and that's so great that you found a teacher that was able to make you laugh. There's a couple of really good websites that I would suggest perhaps just trying out some classes. So perhaps it might be interesting for you to maybe try yoga in a more meditative state. So perhaps it could be interesting for you to maybe try some yin yoga. One thing people forget in yoga isn't just moving. So we do the postures, we do the moving. That's a thing called asana. And then you have your breath, which goes alongside of it. So yoga is breath. So yoga is a moving meditation. So maybe what we can do is the first kind of 3-4 days, perhaps you can find a site that works for you. I can give you a few recommendations. I like practicing with Aloe Muse and Yoga Glow. They're 2 really good websites, or my classes, whichever you prefer. Just a few vinyasa classes every single morning. I'd say you get up, for me, or if it works better for you in the evening, but for me, I love to start my day. So have your hot water or lemon, try to have an empty belly, do a bit of practice and use it as your meditation, and really focusing and listening to the teacher when she's saying inhale and when she's saying exhale, really truly noting that and really trying to find that within your body, because I think that's when the special moments happen, when you're really focusing on the breath and your body. That's when all the kind of magic happens. So allowing your practice to maybe go a little bit, delving a bit deeper by really focusing on the breath. Then you can maybe start doing some yogas that are a little bit more slower by nature. So they could be anything that's labeled slow flow, yin flow, restorative flow. Maybe trying some of those, and then through that really getting into your breath even deeper and allowing your fascia to see how it feels in your body, to relax and to open up in that way, maybe.
In terms of kind of like starting, would you show me some basic moves that I could
do? Start with a downward dog. I always feel like downward dog is an amazing move to really kind of suss out what's going on with the body, because it's something you do all the time in vinyasa classes, and it's probably one of the first poses that you'll do kind of on your hands and your feet. So knowing kind of just feeling it out a bit more than usual, even if the teacher directs you to move on, finding ways to kind of suss out what's going on in the body with your down dog is brilliant. So I'll show you a down dog now. So you normally come onto it from your hands, and your hands are placed onto the ground. Your toes are curled under, and you really focus in on engaging in the core. Before you do anything, you're kind of just having that slight engagement in the core, making sure your bum is an arched back. You're really allowing yourself to just having a nice neutral spine. You're going to curl the toes, the knees lift, and then you push. You're not pushing or pulling anything. You're not pushing and pulling to get your ankles down. Like a lot of people do in class, you get a lot of people coming around and pulling down your ankles when you're just not ready to do that. So in this posture, you're focusing on really rolling back the shoulder blades. The head is nice and relaxed, and you're gently pedaling out the feet. So maybe placing the right ankle down, the left ankle down, and making sure everything's nice and relaxed. And the main thing I always say to my students to take note of is have a look at your hands in your downward dog. And how we meet the earth is how we meet ourselves in life sometimes. So if I look down now, I notice I'm kind of grasping, I'm really kind of aggressively holding the earth, right? So maybe that might say something about where I'm at today. Or else perhaps some people might be aimlessly flopping their hands on the mat. So what I always kind of say is kind of give a little shake of your hands, and mindfully and gracefully and kindly placing your hands onto the earth with how you want to meet your day, you know? So really placing them as an intention. And then from here, again, you pedal out the feet. Perhaps you might want to lift a leg. And again, like I said, this will kind of show up the tightnesses in the body. So we'll kind of perhaps show up if your hamstrings are a bit tight, your neck's a bit stiff. And I always in this position as well say to my students to relax the face. So maybe giving a little, or relaxing your eyeballs, relaxing your mouth. And this is just a really great resetting posture. So that's the downward dog. So perhaps when you're doing your classes this week and you're in your down dog, really, you know, coming into it with intention. And with me, alignment's important in my classes, but it's more about feeling like, yes, you should roll your shoulders back. And yes, you're aiming to get your ankles down. But how does it feel in your body? That's all I care about in my classes, because you're not really going to injure yourself when you're really relaxed, you know? So you feel safe and you feel relaxed in your body. The chances of you getting injured are quite slim. So another pose would be the child's pose, my favorite pose. I think it's everyone's favorite pose, to be fair. So again, from here, you're bringing your toes together. Your knees are around elbow width apart. Your hands, again, you're meeting everything with intention, your hands, and you're basically sitting your bum back towards your heels, and you're really reaching your hands out, and you're really trying to get your breasts onto the ground. So really pulling your armpits down towards the ground, and your forehead rests on the ground here.
I think you had again this really beautiful phrase. You had a really beautiful phrase in one of your previous classes, which was something like dipping your breasts in honey.
In honey.
Yeah.
I love that. So true. Because when we're doing that, it's such a this posture is so great for our lower back. It stretches that under our arms, and it just allows our groin to open, allows our hips to open. So the thing to notice as well when you're doing yoga, it might not be a strenuous pose, but what it's doing is massive. You know, my groin is open, my bum is engaged, I'm stretching my armpits, my lower back, everything is being worked on. So the child's pose is a great one to come into if you're ever getting a bit overwhelmed in class, everything's getting a bit too much, you want to catch your breath and tune back into yourself. This is a great posture for tuning back in. So that's what I always say to the people I'm teaching. Anytime, child's pose is the one. Another of my favorite poses, because I can be an anxious type of person sometimes, one of the postures I like to do is called the Sufi Grind. So I don't know if you can see me, but I'm basically sitting cross-legged on my mat. My hands are placed on my knees. I roll my shoulder blades back, have a nice long spine, and all I'm basically doing is doing a nice little rock around. So I'm rotating my upper body around my lower body. And this, again, it's a simple posture, but it really is an amazing posture for grounding, for feeling your sit bones on the earth, for kind of working any kind of niggles and creaks that you might come across in your lower body. And it opens up the groin area. So when we do that as well, it induces kind of creativity. It gets rid of any kind of stagnant energy. So any kind of hip opening fluid movements around the lower part of the body is just great for inducing that. So again, you're just kind of having a little rock and roll in these positions. They're one of my favorites.
You can feel it throughout like your whole body.
Yeah, exactly. And again, I'm working with any sticky parts that feel sticky, you know. Another favorite posture is because I love doing any kind of hip opening moves. They're my favorite things to do. And I think it's because my hips are quite flexible. I feel like I can really relax in hip opening postures. So the pigeon is a lot of people's favorite pose. And the pigeon you come to by, in your downward facing dog, we'll lift the bum up towards the sky. Again, nice with intention. You'll inhale, you'll lift the right leg up towards the sky. You'll bring the right knee in to meet the nose here. And then you'll bring the right knee over to the right wrist. And the toes come over to the left wrist. So you're in a nice pigeon stretch here. And if you're open in your hips, the kind of tendency is to kind of collapse. But if you are open, again, keeping a nice proud chest and allowing the hips to be even so you're not kind of going over to one side, and gently allowing the hips to open. And perhaps you might stay up here. If you're flexible, you might perhaps come down onto the elbows. But wherever you are, whatever posture, especially if the teacher is telling you to breathe and to relax, really allowing your whole body to just sink with each breath that you do, especially in these kind of postures, and these postures that normally come towards the end of class. Just really allowing yourself these moments to just open up, because this posture is opening into the hips. So again, you'll stay here for however many breaths feels good for you if you're doing your home practice. And again, you're keeping nice and level. If you're up, you're up. You're up straight. Your back is nice and open. Or if you're coming down, and you're just resting and you're grounding and sinking and keeping those hips level. And you'll do that on both sides. So that's another one that's fantastic. And did I do another one that's great? I don't know if I mentioned it, but any kind of inversion. And an inversion basically means when your lower body is above your upper body. So that being a headstand, that being a shoulder stand, that being anything where your legs are just above. Because when you do that, it's scientifically proven to calm down your nervous system. You come out of your fight or flight mode and your body is gradually brought literally scientifically down because all the blood is rushing down and it's truly actually relaxing you. So that could be any kind of inversion. The practice, the simplest one is literally, it's called the bug pose. You'll literally, I'll show you in a second. You have the bug pose, shoulder stand or headstand. So whenever you're directed when you're doing your week of yoga, any kind of inversion, try and stay, even if they're moving on slightly, if you try and stay for 10 breaths, because that's when you're really going to feel the effects of any inversion. So we'll do the simplest inversion here. You're going to be lying on your back. Your feet are just grounded on the floor for a second, and your palms are placed on the ground, and you're literally just going to lift your legs up towards the sky. And that is the simplest one in the world. Your head's on the ground, and you're literally chilling out here, heads on the ground, palms on the ground, and your feet are relaxed and they're up. And that's it. And it's the simplest of poses. That is, if you sit there for 10 breaths and you're being mindful, hopefully that will in some way stimulate a response that is calming. If it's doing its job, which it should, because it always does. When you're breathing with intention and you're in any kind of posture, it's fantastic. So yeah, the downward dog. Again, I'm not the kind of teacher. Perhaps it would be interesting to speak to a teacher who's really, really about alignment. I'm not. For me, I believe it's very difficult to get injured. If you have a teacher who's coming and pulling and tugging, that's one thing. But if you're relaxed and you are breathing and you're not pushing or pulling your body in any ways that doesn't feel good, if anything doesn't feel nice, back out. Yoga is meant to feel good. And if you're pushing yourself, it's good you're pushing yourself too hard. Your body is not ready to do that thing yet. There's encouragement and there's pushing and there's pulling. So when you're doing your week of yoga, again, starting off with the vinyasa classes, what you're used to, really focusing on the breath and then moving to slightly a bit more calming yogas throughout the end of the week, that being less movement and perhaps more meditation, more breath. Then we can compare perhaps at the end of it how the focusing on the breath helped and how you liked the other forms of yoga perhaps. And you can enlighten me because I haven't been trained in those, so I'd be interested to see what you thought.
Thank you so much for today and giving me
Thank you, my pleasure.
Insights. I'm really excited to kind of do more this week, to know more about it.
Great.
How you feel.